Born of Revolution, 1773 to 1791. William Henry Harrison was born on February 9, 1773, in Berkeley Plantation, Charles City County, Virginia, to one of the most politically powerful families in colonial America. His father, Benjamin Harrison V., was a prominent planter, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and three-time governor of Virginia. His mother, Elizabeth Bassett Harrison, also came from a family steeped in Virginian aristocracy. The Harrisons were wealthy landowners, slaveholders, and deeply committed to public service. William grew up surrounded by discussions of liberty, politics, and revolution. The world young Harrison was born into was one of upheaval and change. The American colonies were in the midst of tension with However, his academic journey was cut short by tragedy. In 1791, when William was just 18, his father passed away. The family estate was left heavily in debt, and Harrison was left without the financial support needed to complete his education. That same year, he abandoned his medical studies and sought another path. Drawn by adventure and public duty, Harrison joined the U.S. military, beginning a journey that would carry him across dangerous frontiers and into the pages of American history. Frontier warrior, the Indian Wars and Battle of Fallen Timbers, 1791 to 1798. After joining the U.S. Army in 1791, Harrison received a commission as an ensign in the 1st Infantry Regiment, which was stationed in the Northwest Territory, a vast, unsettled region comprising present-day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and parts of Wisconsin. This territory was riddled with tension between Native American tribes defending their lands and American settlers encroaching westward. The U.S. government was eager to assert control and open the land for white settlement. Harrison was immediately thrown into the middle of the Northwest Indian War, a brutal conflict between the U.S. and a confederation of Native American tribes backed by British support. In 1794, under the command of General Mad Anthony Wayne, Harrison served as an aide-de-camp and played a role in one of the war's most important engagements, the Battle of Fallen Timbers. This decisive American victory crushed Native resistance in the region and led to the signing of the Treaty of Greenville, 1795, which ceded vast tracts of land in Ohio to the U.S. government. Harrison's courage in battle and administrative skill earned him a promotion to lieutenant and later captain. He gained a reputation as a disciplined, capable officer and also developed a nuanced understanding of Native American cultures and frontier diplomacy. This knowledge would prove vital in his later political and military dealings. During this period, Harrison also grew increasingly interested in territorial governance and national politics. He saw the West not only as a battleground but as the future of the American Republic. His time in the wilderness shaped his ideas about expansion, manifest destiny, and the balance between military power and negotiation. By 1798, after 7 years in the Army, Harrison resigned his commission and sought a new role in public service, one that would put his military experience and frontier expertise to political use. He was soon appointed Secretary of the Northwest Territory by President John Adams, marking the beginning of his political ascent. From soldier to statesman, delegate to Congress and the Land Act, 1799 to 1801. As Secretary of the Northwest Territory, Harrison became deeply involved in administrative and legislative issues affecting the frontier. He quickly proved to be more than just a soldier. He was an effective communicator, a thoughtful planner, and an advocate for settlers' rights. His charisma and growing popularity among frontiersmen led to his election in 1799 as the territory's non-voting delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives. In Congress, Harrison's most notable achievement was the Land Act of 1800. The law revolutionized how Western land was sold, allowing settlers to buy smaller plots, as little as 320 acres, on credit, rather than having to purchase large tracts outright. This made land ownership more accessible to ordinary Americans and accelerated westward expansion. The bill made Harrison a hero among pioneers and settlers, solidifying his image as a man of the people, someone who understood their struggles and championed their rights. His success also drew the attention of national political leaders, especially President Thomas Jefferson, who admired Harrison's ability to manage Native affairs and promote American settlement. Jefferson soon appointed him governor of the newly created Indiana Territory in 1801, a massive stretch of land that included present-day Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota and Michigan. This position gave Harrison almost unchecked authority, including the power to make treaties with native tribes, appoint local officials, and command the territorial militia. Thus began a new chapter in Harrison's life, no longer just a soldier or congressman, but now the central figure in shaping America's western frontier. As governor, he would face some of the greatest challenges of his life, including rebellion, warfare, and the rise of one of the most powerful native leaders in American history. Governor of the Indiana Territory, 1801 to 1812. In 1801, at just 28 years old, William Henry Harrison was appointed the governor of the Indiana Territory by President Thomas Jefferson. The position placed him at the forefront of America's westward expansion, overseeing a region larger than any single U.S. state at the time, including today's Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and parts of Michigan and Minnesota. Jefferson chose Harrison specifically because he believed him capable of managing the delicate and often dangerous balance between Native American diplomacy, white settler demands, and federal government expectations. The governorship granted Harrison extraordinary powers. He could appoint judges, create laws with the help of a small council, command the militia, and, most significantly, negotiate treaties with native tribes. Harrison's primary goal was to secure land for American settlers. Over his 12-year tenure, he negotiated 11 treaties that opened up over 60 million acres of native land to American expansion. These treaties were controversial. While some involved fair negotiations and compensation, many were signed under pressure, manipulation, or unclear terms, especially with tribes who did not fully understand the consequences or did not speak for all members of their confederacy. His most infamous treaty was the Treaty of Fort Wayne, 1809, through which Harrison acquired over 3 million acres from several tribes. But this treaty sparked serious backlash, not just among Native Americans, but among rival leaders. The Shawnee leader Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, the Prophet, began uniting native tribes into a pan-tribal confederation to resist further land cessions. Despite the growing resistance, Harrison remained firm in his belief that American expansion was both inevitable and righteous. He increased militia training, reinforced forts, and wrote prolifically to Washington about the native threat. The conflict that had been simmering for years would soon erupt into open warfare, placing Harrison and Tecumseh on a collision course that would shape both their destinies and the future of the American Midwest. Tecumseh's challenge and the Battle of Tippecanoe, 1811. By 1810, tensions in the Indiana Territory were boiling over. Tecumseh, a brilliant Shawnee warrior and statesman, had become the most prominent native leader in America. He opposed the Treaty of Fort Wayne and all similar agreements, arguing that no single tribe had the right to sell land without the consent of all. His brother, Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet, had sparked a spiritual revival among many native communities, urging them to reject white influence, return to traditional ways, and resist U.S. expansion. Tecumseh's confederation was headquartered at a settlement known as Prophetstown, near the confluence of the Wabash and Tippecanoe rivers. By 1811, Prophetstown had grown into a well-organized hub of native resistance, attracting warriors from far and wide. Fearing the rise of this powerful movement, Harrison requested military reinforcements and led a preemptive strike against Prophetstown in November 1811. With around 1,000 troops, mostly militia, Harrison marched toward the town and camped nearby. On the morning of November 7th, while negotiations were still theoretically open, native warriors launched a surprise attack. The resulting clash, known as the Battle of Tippecanoe, was fierce and chaotic. Though the native warriors fought bravely, Harrison's forces repelled them. The next day, Harrison's men burned Prophetstown to the ground. Militarily, the battle was inconclusive, but it was spun as a U.S. victory, and Harrison's reputation soared. Newspapers across the nation hailed him as a hero, and he was nicknamed Old Tippecanoe. However, the battle also radicalized Tecumseh and pushed his confederation into a formal alliance with the British, who were themselves on the brink of war with the United States. Just months later, the U.S. would declare war on Britain, and Harrison would once again be called to service. this time on a much larger battlefield. The War of 1812 and the Battle of the Thames, 1812 to 1813. As the War of 1812 erupted between the United States and Britain, Harrison was appointed a major general in the U.S. Army, tasked with defending the northwest frontier. The war was not only between nations, it also became a renewed struggle between American forces and the native confederation led by Tecumseh. Harrison's initial military assignments were fraught with difficulty. He struggled with poorly supplied troops, untrained militia, and political interference from Washington. His first task was to retake Detroit, which had fallen to British and native forces under General Isaac Brock and Tecumseh. However, internal rivalries delayed action. In 1813, with momentum shifting, Harrison launched a coordinated campaign to push British and native forces out of the Northwest. After a series of maneuvers, he led his forces across the Canadian border and faced off against British troops and Tecumseh's warriors near Moraviantown on the Thames River in Ontario. The Battle of the Thames on October 5, 1813, was a decisive American victory. British forces retreated, and Tecumseh was killed in action, a crushing blow to the native resistance movement. Though the exact details of his death remain disputed, Tecumseh's demise marked the collapse of his confederation, and Harrison emerged as the man who had broken the last organized native resistance in the Old Northwest. Harrison's victory was celebrated across the United States. He became a national hero, second only to Andrew Jackson, whose fame was rising in the South. The war continued for 2 more years, but Harrison resigned his commission in 1814, frustrated with how President Madison's administration had treated him and dissatisfied with the political favoritism that plagued military decisions. Despite his resignation, Harrison had cemented his image as a military savior of the frontier. His name was now firmly implanted in the public imagination, a name that political strategists would one day resurrect in pursuit of the White House. A civilian once again returned to private life, 1814 to 1816. After resigning from the Army in 1814, William Henry Harrison returned to civilian life in North Bend, Ohio, a small community near Cincinnati along the Ohio River. Despite his fame as a war hero, he found himself frustrated and somewhat disillusioned by politics in Washington. He had been ignored and sidelined by certain cabinet officials during the war, and now, in peacetime, there was no immediate role for him in national service. Life at home was quiet compared to the chaos of war. He focused on managing his modest farm, raising his children, and tending to family matters. Harrison was a man of relatively humble means. Unlike the plantation wealth he was born into, his own financial situation was modest. He earned income primarily through farming and small business ventures, including selling flour from his mill. During this time, he also stayed intellectually and politically engaged. He wrote articles on military strategy and frontier policy and remained popular among Ohioans, many of whom remembered him as the man who had secured their safety during the war. While Harrison tried to live quietly, his name was constantly mentioned in political circles as a potential candidate for higher office. Though he did not yet pursue it aggressively, public service still called to him. It wasn't long before opportunity returned, and Harrison re-entered political life, beginning a new chapter, not as a military commander, but as a lawmaker and statesman. Political roles: Congress, Senate, and diplomacy, 1816 to 1829. In 1816, Harrison was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from Ohio. His time in Congress was marked by his continued advocacy for veterans, land rights, and Western development. Though not a fiery speaker or dominant figure in debate, he was respected for his experience, practical knowledge, and honesty. He chaired the Committee on Military Affairs, using his first-hand knowledge to shape defense policies and veterans' benefits. In 1819, Harrison served briefly in the Ohio State Senate, and though this was a more localized position, it kept him engaged in public service. He remained a respected figure across party lines. By 1825, Harrison returned to Washington as a member of the U.S. Senate. During his 4-year term, he mostly aligned with the National Republican Party, which supported internal improvements, national banks, and a stronger federal government. His votes reflected his belief in westward development, but he was more conservative than some of his colleagues and still held many Jeffersonian views of governance. In 1828, President John Quincy Adams appointed Harrison as minister to Gran Colombia, present-day Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama, a region recently liberated by Simón Bolívar from Spanish control. While in Bogotá, Harrison wrote a controversial report criticizing Bolívar's authoritarian tendencies and warning against the rise of dictators in Latin America. His report gained attention in the U.S., especially among those wary of executive overreach. However, his diplomatic career was cut short after Andrew Jackson became president in 1829. As a political opponent of Adams, Jackson recalled Harrison, ending his time in international service. Though now in his late 50s, Harrison was not ready for retirement. The rise of new political factions, especially the Whig Party, would soon give Harrison one final and remarkable opportunity: a run for the presidency. The rise of the Whigs and the election of 1836. By the 1830s, American politics was undergoing a seismic shift. Andrew Jackson's populism, strong use of executive power, and dismantling of the Bank of the United States inspired both admiration and alarm. His opponents formed a new coalition, the Whig Party, uniting former National Republicans, anti-Jackson Democrats, and other factions. The Whigs needed a nationally known figure to challenge Jackson's chosen successor, Martin Van Buren, in the 1836 presidential election. Harrison, with his spotless reputation, frontier background, and military fame, emerged as a top contender. He had never been deeply partisan and was seen as a unifying figure who could appeal to the West, the South, and moderate Northerners. The Whig strategy in 1836 was unconventional. Instead of uniting behind one candidate, they ran three regional candidates to try and prevent Van Buren from winning an electoral majority, hoping to throw the election to the House of Representatives. Harrison ran as the main Midwestern and Northern candidate, while Hugh Lawson White and Daniel Webster represented the South and Northeast. Despite a strong campaign, Van Buren won with 170 electoral votes, thanks to Jackson's popularity and a divided Whig field. Harrison, however, finished second with 73 electoral votes, outperforming expectations and making a name for himself nationally. Though he lost, Harrison's campaign had re-energized his image. The Whigs had tested the waters and found a candidate who could truly rival Democratic power. For years later, they would unite behind him, launching one of the most iconic political campaigns in American history: the Log Cabin Campaign and the election of 1840. After his impressive showing in the 1836 election, William Henry Harrison's political future was reinvigorated. Over the next 4 years, dissatisfaction with President Van Buren grew. The nation was mired in the Panic of 1837, a severe economic depression. Banks failed, unemployment soared, and public confidence in the Democratic leadership waned. The Whig Party, now more unified, saw their chance in the election of 1840. At their national convention in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they nominated Harrison for president and John Tyler of Virginia for vice president, both former Democrats, selected to broaden appeal. Their famous campaign slogan became, "Backhand index pointing right, Tippecanoe and Tyler too." The Whigs ran one of the most dynamic and modern campaigns in U.S. history. To contrast Van Buren's image as a wealthy elitist, they reinvented Harrison as a humble man of the people, living in a log cabin and drinking hard cider, even though he was actually born on a plantation and lived in a brick house. Regardless, the image stuck. Campaign rallies, songs, parades, slogans, banners, buttons, and even log cabin-shaped bottles were used to promote the Harrison brand. This election saw the birth of mass marketing in politics. Harrison, now in his late 60s, was not a fiery orator, but the campaign emphasized his military heroism, especially Tippecanoe and the War of 1812. He rarely spoke publicly, letting his image carry the day. On Election Day, November 1840, Harrison won in a landslide, securing 234 electoral votes to Van Buren's 60. He received over 1.2 million popular votes, the highest ever at that time. The war hero was now president. For many, he symbolized stability, national unity, and integrity. qualities the nation desperately sought after years of turmoil. But fate had other plans. Inauguration and the longest speech in presidential history. On March 4, 1841, William Henry Harrison took the oath of office as the 9th President of the United States. At 68 years old, he was the oldest president to be inaugurated at that time. The weather in Washington, D.C. was cold and wet. Despite warnings from his staff and family, Harrison insisted on riding on horseback, wearing no overcoat, gloves, or hat, wanting to demonstrate his vigor and vitality. Then came the moment that would go down in history. Harrison delivered the longest inaugural address ever, nearly 2 hours long, totaling over 8,000 words. He spoke on topics ranging from Roman history to American democracy, determined to prove his intellectual depth. Many in the audience grew cold and fatigued as the rain began falling. But Harrison, eager to shake the perception of being a mere military figure, pressed on. The speech made headlines, but it came at a cost. Within days, Harrison developed a cold. It worsened quickly, turning into pneumonia. At the time, medical science was primitive. Doctors treated him with methods like bloodletting and opium, which likely weakened him further. The new president never recovered. Presidency cut short. On April 4, 1841, just 31 days after taking office, William Henry Harrison died in the White House. He became the first president in American history to die in office. The nation was stunned. Mourning ceremonies were held across the country. The press, regardless of political leanings, published tributes to Harrison as a man of principle and courage. His death created an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The U.S. Constitution at the time was unclear on what should happen when a president dies in office. Did the vice president become president, or merely act as one? Harrison's vice president, John Tyler, firmly asserted that he was now the full president, not just acting in that role. While some members of Congress resisted, Tyler's firm stance prevailed. He took the oath of office and assumed full powers. This moment became one of the most important precedents in American constitutional history, and later formed the basis of the 25th Amendment, which clearly defines presidential succession. Ironically, though Harrison's presidency was the shortest, his death shaped how future transitions would occur. Legacy and historical impact. While Harrison left no policies or executive actions behind, his life had already significantly impacted the nation. His legacy rests not in laws passed, but in military victories that opened up the Northwest for American expansion, territorial governance that helped create new states, the precedent of presidential succession set by his death, his influence on national campaign strategies, making politics more public and performative. Harrison became a symbolic figure, a man who bridged the revolutionary generation with the emerging American identity. His death also triggered debates about presidential age, health, and the power of symbolism in leadership. Many later admired his humility, modesty, and personal integrity, even those who disagreed with his policies. Family, descendants, and final resting place. William Henry Harrison was married to Anna Tuthill Sims, the daughter of a New Jersey judge. They had 10 children, though several died young. Anna did not accompany Harrison to Washington, D.C., and never lived in the White House. She only learned of her husband's death through a letter. Their son, John Scott Harrison, later became a U.S. congressman. More famously, Harrison's grandson, Benjamin Harrison, would be elected the 23rd President of the United States in 1888, making them one of only 2 grandfather-grandson presidential duos, the other being the Adams family. Harrison was buried in North Bend, Ohio, at a site overlooking the Ohio River. His tomb was eventually designated a National Historic Site, known today as the William Henry Harrison Tomb State Memorial. Conclusion: the man whose death shaped the presidency. William Henry Harrison's life was a journey from the aristocratic plantations of Virginia to the untamed frontiers of the Midwest, and finally to the White House. He was a soldier who fought for American expansion, a governor who negotiated with and fought against native nations, a general who crushed Britain's and Tecumseh's influence in the Northwest, a political figure who symbolized populist appeal, and finally, a president whose death changed how the U.S. would handle crises of succession forever. Though his presidency lasted only a month, his life tells the story of an entire era in American history. Expansion, identity, conflict, and unity. He is remembered today not just as the man with the shortest presidency, but as a figure whose legacy reached far beyond his brief time in office.